welcome Ryan and Joe. The next session will be about standardizing the model development and approval process. The two are software engineers of Capital One, I believe. I will leave a brief introduction of yourselves to you. So yeah, the stage is yours.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So welcome everybody. This is standardizing the model development and approval process using Rubicon ML at Capital One. And so a quick team intro. So I'm Joe Wolfe, and also presenting today is Ryan Soley. We're both software engineers at Capital One under the Center for Machine Learning organization, specifically on ML tools, where we build tools for the machine learning use cases within the company. And as part of our work, we developed Rubicon ML, and that's what we're diving into today. So I'm going to start by giving a brief overview of the product, so why we created it and what the main components of it are. And then I'm going to hand off to Ryan, who will dive deeper into the integrations that it offers and talk specifically about how it works with Dask and how it kind of fits into this ecosystem. All right, so common questions that we heard from our data scientists and our ML engineers around model training. We got a lot of how should I track my model experimentation over time? How can I view all this data efficiently and explore it, search and filter it? How could I visualize my data to better identify trends and gather other insights there? And then after the training process is done, how do I share this data with collaborators or reviewers? And how can I specify exactly what I want to share out of all the content that I have? And ultimately, like, what is the final step for getting my model approved for use? So to answer those questions, we developed Rubicon ML. And so it's a lightweight Python library, and it offers a standardized logging process. So this process lets you track your experiment data over time. And the key points are that it's always reproducible and it's also searchable. It also comes with a dashboard, and the dashboard lets you visualize and filter your experiment data. And then it comes with a collaboration process that lets you share subsets as you specify with collaborators and reviewers, so they can look at exactly what you want to paint the full picture. And this is very focused around the model development process, but our tool is flexible. So, you know, it can be adjusted for other use cases as well. But then the other key points, it's reproducible experimentation, and then it's extensible. And Ryan will talk through those integrations that we offer. All right, so we're going to jump through the quick look. So I'm just going to hop to the docs. And quick points, just we'll look at the install steps. You can install Rubicon ML through Conda with the Conda Forge channel or through pip. If you use pip, you also would want to install some extras, like for the dashboard as an extra, and some of the integrations are installable as extras. All right, so let's look at the glossary so you can understand the terminology that we use within Rubicon ML. So the top level object is called a project, and a project is basically just a collection of experiments. Experiments represent a model run, and they track inputs and outputs. And so your inputs for your model run can be your parameters and your features, and your outputs would be your metrics. And then additionally, we also support data frame logging and artifact logging, and both of those can be tied to either an experiment or to a project. And for data frames, you know, we support Pandas data frames, but of course we also support Dask data frames. Okay, so now we could go through this quick look. I'm going to jump to this example in Jupyter Lab so we can walk through it together. Okay, so this example just creates a simple classification model taken from scikit-learn docs. And so we're going to run through it and just basically call out the different pieces of Rubicon and how they're used. So the starting point is just loading the data set from scikit-learn. It's going to just be a wine data set. So our classifier model is just going to it's going to classify the different types of wines. And so we'll load that, and then we'll look at our library itself. So a couple things to call out here. The logging piece is built on top of fsspec. So it's extensible to support any backends that fsspec supports. Right now, we support log to memory, which would be for testing or just local experimentation. And then we support local file systems and S3. And so here we'll dive into an example. So we're importing a Rubicon ML library, and we're working with the top level Rubicon object. And here we will create that instance. So we're setting our persistence to the file system and to a local path. And then we're creating a project to store this work called one classification. And so I created that. We can see the Rubicon root folder locally. And if I click in there, we can see we have a folder for our project data. Okay. And then this run experiment method kind of just bunches up all of the Rubicon methods that we have available, just to show how they could be used. When you would use this in practice, it would normally be split up or separated, but we'll just take a look at this. So we pass a Rubicon project in, so we can log an experiment to that. We could specify some details around that experiment, and then we can log parameters, our features, and then here we're just making a scikit-learn pipeline. We're fitting that pipeline using predict to score it. And then we're logging the accuracy metric to the experiment as well. And then we also will create a confusion matrix and log that as a data frame, which we can pull back later on. And then we'll use Rubicon ML's tagging ability to identify experiments that have an accuracy greater than 90% with success. So I'll run that, and then we'll just run for this different parameter set here. And if I dove in, you can see we now have experiments, and each experiment has data tied to it. Right. So it's as simple as that. And then if we wanted to use the S3 logging or the in-memory, it's simply just changing the persistence type. For S3, it's just all you need to do is prepend the S3 URL. And as long as you have your token set, you would be good to go. Okay, so then the second piece that we talked about was our dashboard. And the dashboard lets you explore and visualize the data that you've logged. So here we have our dashboard. We can see the project on the left, and we have just one grouping of experiments right now. So if I drop this down, we can see all of our experiment data. You can easily search on this data and sort it accordingly so that we can see what our best results were. And then additionally, you can use this nice plot to gather some insights from your training data. And so this is pretty simple use case, but you can imagine if you have a lot of parameters and you're trying to see which ones are really influencing your accuracy, this chart is very useful. And it's has a lot of functionality built in. Yeah, so that's the dashboard. And also you can hide in toggle columns between hidden and shown. Cool. So then the last piece that we wanted to talk about was the publishing and sharing process. So this is the collaboration piece. And this is, at the end when you're ready, to hand this off to somebody else, and you just want to show them a subset of your experiment data that really paints the full picture, you can do that. So for this example, I'm just using the Rubicon publish method. This is built on top of intake. And I am just grabbing the experiments that have the success tag. So I'm going to run that, and that's going to create this wine catalog YAML file. And then as a consumer, I would just import intake and open this catalog. And then I could discover and read, and you can see I'm pulling my experiment back. And the one important thing to note here is that this process, it does not move or copy the data, it simply references it. So if you have data on S3, you can pass around this catalog file, and as long as users have access to that S3 bucket, they would be able to read the experiments that you specified. So that wraps up the quick look. So now I'm going to pass it to Ryan to talk more about the integrations that Rubicon ML offers.
Cool. Thank you, Joe. Let me get sharing. All right. Oh, this toolbar is in my way. There we go. Okay. So like Joe mentioned, Rubicon was built on a lot of the tools that already exist in the PyData ecosystem. We've integrated with a lot of tools that, Dask integrates with very well itself. But before I get to some of those, I do want to quickly call out our Git integration. So of course, Rubicon is very focused on auditability and reproducibility. So tying our results, our experimentation to the code that created those experiments is super important. So quickly here, I want to just show off instantiating our Rubicon object with this auto git enable tag. So basically what this is doing is by providing this, we're telling Rubicon that we're running from within a Git repository and that Rubicon has access to some Git commands to get some more metadata about each of our experiments and projects. So now we'll see when I create a project, it'll automatically be populated with the GitHub URL. And this is just a link straight to the GitHub that is hosting this example here. And for every experiment that we log to that project, we now have our branch name and our commit hash. So what that means is now that anytime we pull an experiment back, we can get a reference right to the code that created it. If we spin up the dashboard here, we'll see that this Git integration has added a few more things to take a look at. So if we select our project here, we'll see now that we have our one experiment at commit EDC, whatever here. So this link here sends me directly to this code, right to where it was generated from. So if we take a look at a little more in-depth example, so what this is just pulling some projects that I logged earlier. They're logged to this Rubicon root right now. You can imagine if these were in S3, if someone was sharing with you, then you would want to take a look at this. You could come check out their experiments in the, which one is it? This guy. So now you'll notice we have a few groups here. So that's another thing to call out. The GitHub commits, our experiments are now grouped by them. So each of these dropdowns contains the same information that Joe showed you before, but now they're all grouped up here. And if I were to click this, I can hop over, and this is taking me to a different repo now. So I can dig right into the model code here and see exactly what produced these experiments. So that way we have really full auditability and traceability without without even having to specify any particular parameters if we don't want to. If the link to GitHub's enough, then that's enough. But of course, Joe already showed you a ton of other things you can log to supplement that data. So that's our Git integration. And now I'm going to clear this out and move on to the next one. Also, I gotta get rid of this data that's hanging around before I run these. Let's see. All right. So our next integration is with scikit-learn. So one of the pieces of feedback we got was that, peppering logger statements all over the code can be a bit cumbersome, and in some scenarios, there are well-defined things that we would want to log where that wouldn't be entirely necessary. So we developed our own scikit-learn pipeline extension. So essentially what this is a wrapper around scikit-learn's pipeline that provides Rubicon logging between each step in the pipeline. Our pipeline still fits the scikit-learn estimator, so it can be plugged into other, in with other scikit-learn tools. It can be plugged into grid searches and other searches and cross-validators. But the big thing to call out is that when we use the Rubicon pipeline, we are creating an experiment at the start of each of our fits, and between each step in the pipeline, as we fit and score, we are logging all of our parameters and metrics to Rubicon. So here we are printing out some results of an experiment that we already ran and logged. As you can see, the scalars parameters are all here, the SVC's parameters are all here. By default, this logging is very verbose. So you're going to get every single parameter that comes into those estimators going through, which in some cases can be a lot, which is why down here, I'll go through a more realistic example that shows filtering out some things we may not want and just, running a handful of experiments to see how we can really relate the data and get some value out of this. So this example here was pulled right from scikit-learn. It's a document classification example. So for this first step here, I'm going to define our Rubicon pipeline a little more verbosely. So again, our steps here are passed through exactly the same. Only main difference is we're providing the project here. So this would be enough if that was all we wanted to do, and that would give us our very verbose logging. But what we're doing here is providing some user-defined loggers to filter that down. Now, this filter estimator logger does exactly what it sounds like. You can either select or ignore parameters with it. These filters are, they follow a very simple specification. So if you want to develop your own, it's very easy to do so, and you'll have access to all the parameters, and you can do, for each step, and you can do whatever you want with them. So essentially what we're telling it here is to only look at these three and ignore everything from this step, because we're not really interested in changing anything on it. And here, these are just any keyword args that we want to pass along as metadata to any of our experiments. So we're just giving our experiments a name and telling it what model we're using. So I can start up a Dask client here, and let me make sure I'm connected to my dashboard. Oh, come on. There we go. And we can run across our grid search. So one thing to call out is that Rubicon logging is thread and process safe as long as you're writing to the same, the same mounted file system or remote storage. Everything should be good when things are running in parallel. So as we see here, we had our handful of experiments run. And of course, from the grid search, we can pull off the best score. We can pull off our cross-validation results. But this is a lot to look at. It can be a lot to process. So that's why we can use the Rubicon dashboard again now. So let's load that up and take a look at our grid search project. And now we can see our 24 experiments. Each of them have the things we specified logged, our two parameters from the classifier, the one from the transformer, and nothing from the one that we ignored. And again, here are accuracies. So like Joe showed, we can select everything and compare them all. Take a look at our best one here. Yeah, so really we're just providing a much simpler way to look through the outputs of your scikit-learn pipelines, of your grid searches with very minimal code changes. So running this adding the Rubicon pipeline is as easy as replacing your import here and passing along a project. And yeah, that's what we strive for. We want to make this as seamless as possible, integrate into as many tools as people are already familiar with as possible. So with that, I will show one last integration here with another tool everyone may be familiar with. So Prefect is a workflow manager that is commonly used in the PyData ecosystem. Creating Prefect tasks is pretty easy. They're just annotated functions, which is why we have created a handful of them and put them in the Rubicon library. These all here are very simple wrappers around the existing Rubicon functionality. All of these tasks are really just calling one Rubicon function. They're basically just a pass through with the task annotation. So for this example, I will define a little ETL pipeline. So here we're loading some data, splitting it up, extracting our features, and finally fitting a model here. And this is the exact same code that Joe showed you in the quick look, the same little experiment, and we're just running it, in a Prefect pipeline this time, or a Prefect flow, excuse me. So here we'll define our very simple flow. This one doesn't have Rubicon involved yet. We're just getting our loading our data set, getting our features, and predicting a model. So I will quickly run that flow. And once this is finished, what we'll notice is the results can be kind of difficult to dig out. So here you see I'm getting some flow info. I'm digging into the task runs, pulling out some slugs. There's a lot of indexing, a lot of stuff necessary just to pull out our one accuracy value once this is all finished. So that's why we wanted to involve Rubicon. We didn't want to have to dig through all this to pull our metadata out, we didn't want to have to involve people editing their existing flows. So we editing their existing tasks to involve Rubicon. So we created the Rubicon tasks that can be dumped right in alongside your existing stuff. So this is the flow you just saw with some Rubicon tasks plugged in around it. So this part was already here. We've now added our project and experiment before it. We're logging some features and parameters after it. And then once we fit our model, we're logging our metrics at the very end. So again, we'll get this one started. And once this one's finished, we'll see that we can use the familiar Rubicon interface to pull off much more information from these runs without nearly as much digging around into the prefect guts. So we'll give this one a second to finish up. And here we go. So again, very similar to what we saw with the scikit-learn pipeline, we're getting a lot of stuff logged here to give us a lot of insight into what actually happened during those runs. And of course, Prefect plays very nicely with Dask. So if we get this up and running on a Dask cluster with our Dask executor, we can just define one more task here to log our feature set in full. That's just to make this work nicely in this map setting. And here we have a mapped flow where we have this basically a parameter grid, basically replicating grid search here. This probably isn't something you would really do in practice, but it's just to show the power of Dask and Rubicon combined here to get a nice rich output that we will show on the dashboard once this is finished up. But yeah, these should start executing here. And again, like I said, the Rubicon logging is thread and process safe, so everything should log no problem. And once that wraps up, oh, this one's usually quicker than this. Oh, all right, there we go. And now, again, we can take a look at our dashboard and easily compare all of the maps, the runs we just mapped there. So same as before, we can select all of our experiments, take a look at all the stuff we logged. And if we want to see here, we can see pretty clearly that this is standardized, is the one that's, the one that's giving us our best scores here. So yeah, that is the big picture. Rubicon, Rubicon is very lightweight. It's designed to be easily plugged into lots of existing tools. If there's something that you think Rubicon would fit well into, please let us know. Open an issue. We're looking. We're always looking for ways to improve. We're actively looking for ways to improve the dashboard to make that more useful. So yeah, we're definitely excited to see how people get it integrated into their existing stuff. And yeah, if you have any cool integrations, definitely shoot us a PR. We're interested in getting them into the library. So Joe, if you have anything else to wrap it up, that's all I got.
I think you wrapped it up pretty well.
All right, thanks a lot. That was very interesting. We have still some time for Q&A. The keynote will start shortly, but as always, move on to Slack if you have more questions. But there's one question already. Niels Brown is asking whether or about the differences between Rubicon and ML Flow.
Yeah, so that's a question that we've heard a couple times. One difference right off the bat is that Rubicon ML is completely open source and it's not tied to a specific vendor or product. Another difference is mainly the integrations that we support. So all those pieces that Ryan showed, integration with Git, integration with Prefect, integration with scikit-learn, those are unique for Rubicon ML, and it's really just integrated with the Python PyData ecosystem. And it's very extensible, so it's easy to contribute to versus ML Flow. I think one more call out would be the asynchronous logging support to S3 as well.
Great, thanks. If there are any other questions, we can probably still have one small one. But if there's nothing else right now, there's always the Summit Talks channel in Slack where you can reach out. I'm sure Joe and Ryan are around. And otherwise, I would like to thank the two of you. That was a great talk, very interesting. Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a nice conference.